We're beyond terrified. We don't know what's going on or what to do.
A very powerful demonic has latched itself onto her.
So when you guys investigate these hauntings, how do you stop them from latching onto you?
Well, the way I see it is, it's safer for these things to be in here than out there. It's kind of like keeping guns off the street.
Can you help us?
Yes, we can.
What do you think about cinematic universes? While mega franchise worlds like the MCU certainly seem to overshadow smaller connected universes like the View Askewniverse, there certainly is a mix of positives and negatives within these shared continuities. Among the horror genre's cinematic universes are movies like Freddy vs. Jason, where two large franchises crossed over into one interesting movie? Or how about Spiral from the Book of Saw, where the events of the Saw franchise do exist, but a new serial killer is on the rise? And of course, there's the extensive and ongoing mixed bag of scares and screams that is the Conjuring Universe. The Warren family is practically a goldmine for source material that is sure to set you on edge. The famous New England couple rose to prominence as paranormal investigators in the 1950s. One of their most documented and famous cases was, of course, the Amityville murders of the 1970s. Being that these two were able to maintain a career in this particular field for so long, it's safe to say that between Ed and Lorraine Warren and their many cases, these two have seen some shit.
Well, we've been called demonologists. It's one name for us. Ghost hunters, paranormal researchers.
Kooks.
In today's episode, we're gonna go crawling back to one of my favorite horror directors, this guy, and breaking down potentially his most monumental horror film yet. A film that not only delivered on the very best of Wan's creative sensibilities, but also kicked off a franchise that eventually became the most prominent interconnected cinematic universe in all of modern horror. But what's so special about this film? Well, find out in today's episode when we watch 2013's The Conjuring and break down why we still want to see the adventures of Ed and Lorraine Warren on the big screen. I'm Kier with JoBlo Horror, and you're watching Deconstructing. The Conjuring is a paranormal horror film directed by James Wan and written by Chad and Carrie Hayes. The movie follows the Warren family as they travel to Rhode Island to help a family whose new home seems to be plagued with evil that has its sights set on the house's residents. Along the way, we're in for some frightening apparitions, wonderful performances, and of course, some of those classic James Wan-isms that make it shine. As usual, we are going to be breaking down the movie into our 4 key categories. First, we're going to be talking about the film's origin, which will be quite interesting considering that the movie is based on real people. Then we're going to move on to the movie's legacy, where we discuss the lasting impact the film had on the genre and the franchise that it spawned. Then we'll lighten up the mood a little bit with some trivia, where I give you some fun behind-the-scenes facts to take home with you. And then we'll close it all off by talking about the movie's X Factor, where I zoom in and look for that one thing that takes The Conjuring from being just another decent horror flick to being a genuine classic that's well worth its weight in holy water. So, if you're ready, then keep your backs to the wall and don't forget to drop a like on the video. And let's hit play on The Conjuring. Now, when it comes to the origin of this movie, it's only right to start with the famous couple that it's based on. Ed and Lorraine Warren were both raised Catholic and remained dedicated to the church for their entire lives. They were married in 1945 and both held their own unique talents when it comes to their ties to the paranormal. Ed was known as a demonologist who claimed to have profound and undeniable knowledge of the beyond, and Lorraine was a clairvoyant who claimed to be able to see and communicate with ghosts. Together, the couple worked on cases that made headlines for decades, such as the Annabelle doll possession, Amityville, the Perron family, which this video is about, as well as Union Cemetery and the Enfield poltergeist. Like I said, they were a goldmine for spookiness.
So they'd feel the psychic cold, they'd hear magic whispering,
voices throughout the hallways. At night, they would see ghost lights over their beds in the rooms. There was a time when George and Kathy found themselves about 2 foot from the ceiling.
In the late 90s and early 2000s, a writer named Tony DeRosa Grund had an idea to write a story about the Perron family haunting. The story, of course, happened in real life, but DeRosa Grund added some embellishments to make the script more scary. DeRosa Grund's original script was written from the perspective of the Perron family, mainly the parents.
Guys, you don't know the house well enough, someone's gonna get hurt.
After years of pitching the script and having no luck getting it made, producer Peter Safran joined the party and offered to hire more writers to punch up the script. That's where Chad and Carrie Hayes enter the picture. They overhauled the script, keeping the main storyline, but changing some aspects and cutting other aspects out, and most importantly, changing the story's perspective from the Perron family to the Warrens.
I think he may write a positive article.
Ooh, a non-skeptic.
Now, Lorraine Warren was still alive when this film was going into development, which allowed the writers to interview her multiple times throughout the process of developing the script. The crew also had access to Ed Warren's personal tapes, which provided case notes and details directly from those events. By 2009, the script was ready and pre-production kicked off. James Wan was the first and only director to be attached to the project, and for obvious reason, he was in the midst of a very impressive career. Vera Farmiga, Patrick Wilson, Ron Livingston, and Lily Taylor were cast as the Warrens and the Perrons, and Warner Brothers was all set to roll cameras on their movie, which had a working title of The Warren Files. Lorraine Warren not only consulted on the script, but also consulted on set. While filming, Vera Farmiga spent time with Lorraine in order to help her find the truth of the character. She quotes,
"I just wanted to absorb her essence. I wanted to see the details. She has such mad style. I just wanted to see the way she communicates with her hands, these gestures, her smile, how she moves through space."
Now, what can I say about this movie's legacy? The movie is remembered fondly as a very strong start to a very large franchise. Just looking at its own merits, this movie stands out for its incredible visual style, solid storytelling, and even its striking and haunting score by Insidious composer Joseph Bishara. The movie's marketing was also interesting, with Warner Brothers really pushing the based on a true story angle, something later explained to be loosely based on a true story. I mean, duh.
It means we gotta investigate, gather evidence, and provide proof. And that's the hard part.
There's also a lot that can be said for the performances in this movie. Vera Farmiga is easily one of the most talented actors in the entire franchise, and Patrick Wilson is no stranger to Wan's particular style of horror. Ron Livingston does a wonderful job as the head of the Perron household. I think it's far and away one of his best supporting roles in years.
I gotta admit, I was a little bit skeptical going in. Just want to say thank you, though, for coming out.
And how could we forget Joey King, who was just a little girl when this film was made? Her performance as the daughter of the Perrons is much more than just a screaming role. Her fear translated to the screen in such a way that made audiences equally as terrified of demons as she is. Famously, King had also developed a rare blood disorder during filming that could have potentially been life-threatening. Miraculously, it was reported that once filming wrapped and she was seen for a checkup, the disease mysteriously went away and has since been cleared from the young actor. Talk about divine intervention.
I think what we have here is something extremely manipulative. It's something inhuman.
The Conjuring managed to gross a total of nearly $300 million on its limited budget of only $20 million. This made the film a shoo-in for a sequel, which excited the mass amounts of people who have now gotten into the Warren bandwagon. Critically, the film was well received and still holds a respectable amount of praise from film critics across the world. I know some people personally who consider this the greatest horror film ever made. On its own, this movie will always be remembered for being genuinely frightening. In fact, despite having minimal blood and violence and mostly clean language, the film was given an R rating by the MPAA just for being too scary. The scenes that contain jump scares are mostly effective, with only a few really falling flat, flat, and this was during a time when audiences weren't bored of the piano strike cliches that we're currently criticizing The Nun 2 for. This movie uses our investment in seeing if Ed and Lorraine are for real or full of shit to keep us invested in everything we see, and it just works. In fact, the real legacy that this movie holds is in the fact that from this terrifying first entry came a franchise and shared universe that includes 2 direct sequels, 2 spin-off franchises with the Annabelle trilogy and the Nun series, not to mention the upcoming The Conjuring Last Rites, and a rumored TV series on HBO. It's safe to say that we have not seen the last of these movies or the characters that they've made famous. And then there was even that forgotten Curse of La Llorona film that has since been shunned by the studio and fans of the franchise. But either way, we know one thing is for sure. This movie and the incredible filmmakers and actors behind it are all good enough to create a run of 9 movies in the last 10 years. That is this movie's legacy.
Everything you see in here is either haunted, cursed, or has been used in some kind of ritualistic practice.
You want to know something interesting? The man with fire on his face from Insidious, you know, the main monster with the furry ankles, well, he was played by composer Joseph Bishara, who also provided the musical score for this movie. His skills in being creepy are clearly multifaceted, in that he scares the shit out of us as a red-faced monster with bedhead, and then scares us as a composer with his intense and swelling compositions. You go, Joe.
Awesome, thank you very much. I hope you enjoy.
And before we move on to the movie's X Factor and talk about why we really love this movie, let's see if you can answer this question. In the real story, how many documented deaths took place at the Perrin residence before the family lived there? Was it A, 4, B, 7, C, 10, or D, 19? Comment your answers down below. And just like that, here we are at the X Factor. This segment on the show is sometimes easy and sometimes very difficult because, for the most part, everything that deserves praise in a movie becomes repetitive at a certain point. It would be very easy for me to praise the classic 1970s horror style that James Wan perfectly captured in every frame, and I could go on for hours about how much this movie inspired the next generation of horror blockbusters. I could, and have strongly considered, making this whole final segment about the character of Annabelle and how her brief appearance in this movie is what essentially laid the groundwork for the Conjuring universe at large.
We gave her permission to move into the doll.
Wait.
Truthfully, all of those things deserve to be praised as the sum of their value is worth way more than the individual element. These things just work best when they're served together with finesse and balance. And in that, this movie certainly delivers. But to me, it's almost too easy to do that, and you can probably find that anywhere, or have already had that thought yourself. So instead, I want to spend the remaining minutes of our show discussing the incredible amount of luck and, dare I say, divine intervention that it took to get this movie where it is today. The true secret sauce that separates this movie from good and great. And that is Lorraine Warren. Like the real Lorraine Warren, not this one.
People are affected on their weakest, most vulnerable levels. And I think many times people of science go into a home like this not really expecting to be affected personally, just to be there and be witness to it.
See, this movie is good, and that doesn't change no matter what, real or not. It works on all the levels I mentioned before, but so do many of James Wan's films, and not every one of them has reached this level of acclaim or profit. But having the opportunity to market a movie as a true story, and then to have that message backed by the actual person who was involved in the making of it, that is what drove this movie into the stratosphere. Having Lorraine Warren there added credibility to the frights. She was even part of the marketing. Now, we all know that you're not walking around seeing ghosts and frightening demons in your kitchen, but in a way, none of that matters. You are automatically more open to the idea that someone experienced something that is partially being shown on screen. You know that regardless of what your logic is actually telling you, some of what you're seeing was very real to someone.
James, I think he's adorable, for one thing. I really do. I think the guy is cute.
The thing that I find myself thinking about when I watch this movie is really that had Lorraine Warren not consulted on the film and been part of the marketing, I wouldn't have expected any of this to be even close to factual. But thanks to this one thing, this one X factor, there will always be that one shred of doubt that conjures my deepest, darkest fears.
But we prefer to be known simply as Ed and Lorraine Warren.